In 1948, the legendary psychologist B.F. Skinner conducted an experiment that would fundamentally change how we understand human behavior. He took a group of hungry pigeons and placed them in separate boxes. These boxes were designed to deliver a small amount of food at regular, automatic intervals. Crucially, the food release had nothing to do with what the birds were doing. It was on a timer. The machine didn't care if the pigeon was pecking, standing still, or preening its feathers. It just dropped the grain every 15 seconds. But the pigeons didn't know that. Within minutes, the birds began to exhibit bizarre, frantic behaviors. One bird started spinning counterclockwise in the cage. I know some humans can relate to this. Another began thrusting its head into a corner. A third bird developed a pendulum motion, swinging its head back and forth as if it were performing a strange, rhythmic dance. They were convinced that their specific movement had caused the food to appear. They had created a cause and effect relationship where none existed. Skinner called this superstitious behavior. He realized that when a reward follows an action by pure coincidence, the animal is trapped. The bird thinks, "I turned my head, then the food arrived. Therefore, my head turning caused the food to arrive." The bird repeats the action to get more food, which reinforces the belief. Because the food comes randomly, sometimes it arrives right after the bird performs the trick, strengthening the superstition. Sometimes it doesn't, but the bird remains convinced because the occasional reward is enough to keep the delusion alive. This is exactly what is happening inside your brain every single day. We call it illusory correlation. It is the tendency to see relationships between unrelated events. If you wear your lucky socks and your team wins, your brain files that away as a win for the socks. If you lose, you ignore the socks and blame the referee. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine. It is designed to find meaning in chaos because, in the wild, missing a pattern could be fatal. Imagine you are an early human walking through the tall grass. You hear a rustle. You have two choices. You can assume it is just the wind, or you can assume it is a predator. If you assume it is the wind and you are wrong, you die. If you assume it is a predator and you are wrong, you have simply wasted some energy by running away. Evolution favors the paranoid. It favors the pattern seeker. Those who saw patterns in the grass survived long enough to pass on their genes. We are the descendants of the most superstitious ancestors. But this evolutionary trait has a dark side. It is the birthplace of pseudoscience, conspiracy theories, and radical tribalism. Because our brains are so good at finding patterns, they are also incredibly good at making them up. Look at the way we process news. When two unrelated events happen in the world, our brains immediately try to stitch them together into a coherent narrative. We hate randomness. We find the idea of a chaotic, meaningless universe terrifying. We prefer a cruel, intentional conspiracy over the cold, hard fact that the universe is indifferent to our existence. Think about the stock market. Traders track charts and look for head and shoulder patterns or trend lines that they believe will predict the future. They are the pigeons in the box. They are performing their own version of the head-thrusting dance, hoping that if they draw the right line, the market will feed them. And sometimes it does, but often it doesn't. And when it doesn't, they blame the signal, not the randomness. This psychological phenomenon is known as the Skinner box of life. We are all living in a Skinner box. We perform rituals to pass exams, to land jobs, and to maintain relationships. We believe that if we just work hard enough in a specific way, the universe will reward us. But often, the reward is just a random byproduct of external systems we have no control over. The danger arises when we become so attached to our rituals that we stop testing reality. Consider the placebo effect. This is the most famous manifestation of our superstitious nature. A doctor gives a patient a sugar pill. The patient believes it is medicine. The patient's brain produces endorphins and lowers stress, and the patient actually starts to feel better. The sugar pill did nothing, but the belief caused a physiological change. Superstition is literally capable of changing your biology. But if you rely on the sugar pill for a serious illness, you are putting your life in the hands of a delusion. The human brain is a master at post hoc reasoning. This is the logical fallacy of believing that because one event happened after another, the first event must have caused the second. We do this with everything. I didn't get the promotion because I didn't drink my coffee this morning. My car broke down because I was late paying my insurance. We constantly build these fragile houses of cards out of coincidences to make the world feel predictable. The problem is that our modern world is far more complex than the tall grass of the savannah. The patterns we see today are often illusions created by big data, algorithms, and cognitive biases. We see a spike in a graph and we immediately want to assign a villain or a hero to the cause. We want to know who is responsible. We want to know why. But sometimes there is no why. Sometimes the pigeon just turned its head and the food fell. If you want to escape the trap of your own mind, you have to embrace the most difficult concept in human existence, randomness. You have to accept that most of what happens to you is a product of luck, timing, and sheer statistical probability. It is an uncomfortable thought. It strips away our sense of agency. It makes us feel small. But it is also the most liberating truth you will ever encounter. When you stop believing that your rituals control your fate, you stop being a servant to your own superstitions. You start looking at the world as it actually is, not as you want it to be. You begin to question the patterns instead of blindly following them. You realize that you aren't the center of a cosmic drama. You are just a biological entity navigating a chaotic, complex, and beautiful universe. Ask yourself, how many of your daily habits are actually based on data, and how many are just head-thrusting in the dark? Are you working hard because the work requires it, or are you doing it because you are afraid that if you stop, the food will stop falling? The next time you find yourself feeling like a certain outcome is inevitable because of something you did, pause, stop, look at the box. We are all Skinner's pigeons. But unlike the pigeons, we have the capacity for self-reflection. We have the ability to observe our own brains at work. We can recognize when we are falling into the trap of illusory correlation. We can choose to be scientists of our own lives. We can look for real evidence, demand real data, and accept that sometimes the grain just falls. If you want to master your own psychology, you must learn to live with the void of meaning. You must learn that you don't need a lucky charm to be successful, and you don't need a curse to explain your failure. You are responsible for your actions, but you are not responsible for the randomness of the universe. When you accept this, the need for superstition vanishes. The pigeon never learned the truth. It died in that box, forever convinced that if it just spun one more time, the grain would return. It never understood the machine. It never understood the scientist. It lived its entire life trapped by a coincidence. You have the advantage. You can see the box. You can see the scientist. You can even see yourself. Will you keep dancing for the grain, or will you step out of the box? The choice is entirely yours. But remember, in a world of infinite variables and statistical noise, the most dangerous thing you can do is become too certain of your own patterns. Reality is rarely as simple as a sequence of events. It is a vast, interconnected web of chaos, and the only way to navigate it is to keep your eyes open, your logic sharp, and your superstitions at the door. So, next time you are tempted to knock on wood, ask yourself, is this for the wood or is this for my own peace of mind? And if it is for your peace of mind, are you willing to admit that the wood has absolutely no power over your future? The moment you admit that, you aren't just a pigeon anymore. You are a person who has finally stopped playing the game and started observing the truth. The history of human progress is the history of people realizing that the world does not revolve around our rituals. We moved from praying for rain to understanding meteorology. We moved from sacrificing to the sun to understanding nuclear fusion. Every single step of human advancement has been a step away from the comforting embrace of superstition and into the cold, harsh light of understanding. It is easy to believe in magic. It is hard to believe in math. It is easy to search for a hidden meaning in the clouds. It is hard to accept that they are just water vapor. But the hard path is the only one that leads to true freedom. If you want to own your life, you have to own your mistakes, your successes, and your circumstances without needing to invent an invisible narrative to explain them. The universe is not waiting for you to perform a ritual. It is not judging your actions. It is just spinning. And in that spin, there is infinite potential, not because of a lucky charm and not because of a curse, but because you are here. You are conscious, and you have the ability to observe the machine. So keep looking for patterns, but stay skeptical of the ones that feel too good or too bad to be true. Because in the end, we are all just observers in a giant chaotic experiment. And the smartest thing you can do is recognize when the grain is falling, not because of your dance, but because that's just how the machine works. Don't let your brain trick you into dancing for a reward that was already coming your way. Stop the dance, look at the truth, and start living in the real world.